Manhunt for two men suspected of attempting to abduct a serviceman from RAF Marham in Norfolk. He was out jogging near the airbase when he was approached at knife point. He managed to fight them off and run away.
We're unable at this time to discount terrorism, but I stress that other lines of inquiry are equally plausible.
Tonight, service personnel have been warned to stay on the base as the police hunt for the suspects and their vehicle. Also tonight, Jeremy Corbyn is accused of threatening to sack MPs who don't support him after he says they'll face re-selection. Theresa May meets the French president. He tells her the sooner the UK starts negotiations to leave the EU, the better. Russian track and field athletes lose their legal challenge and will not be allowed to compete at the Rio Olympics because of doping. Beating a path to the West End, the Nigerian musical that's transferring from Lagos to London.
Here in the south, a family's concerned for a mother who hasn't returned home from divorce proceedings in Tunisia. And the excitement builds as the oldest competition in sporting history descends once again on the south coast.
Good evening. A manhunt is underway for two men whom police describe as being of Middle Eastern appearance who attempted to abduct a serviceman out jogging yesterday near his airbase, RAF Marham in Norfolk. He was approached by the two men, one of whom tried to drag him into their car, but he was able to fight him off and run away. The police say while the motive for the attack remains unclear, they can't rule out terrorism. RAF Marham is home to the UK's Tornado bombers, which are currently involved in operations in the Middle East. Sophie Long has more.
On a quiet country lane near a Norfolk airbase, an RAF serviceman narrowly escaped being kidnapped at knife point by two unidentified men. The attempted abduction took place close to the married quarters at about 3:30 yesterday afternoon in broad daylight. An intensive investigation is now underway, including a search for the attackers, their dark minivan and a knife. Police say the young airman who escaped is badly shaken.
The attacker attempted to place his hand on a victim's shoulder and then on his wrist and started to pull him with a degree of force towards the vehicle. Our victim resisted that, managed to break free and effectively fought free from that attack and rendered the first assailant effectively knocked him on the floor.
3 squadrons of Tornado bombers are based here, aircraft that have recently been in action against so-called Islamic State in Iraq. The annual fun day for the families of the nearly 10,000 servicemen and women and support staff who are based here has been allowed to go ahead and continues tonight. People haven't been put off by the road closures and the intense security that remains in place.
We know we're going to be safe, and we know that they're going to have done their utmost to make us safe. So no, absolutely no worries at all.
There's quite a high security base anyway, and to be honest, it's a very safe place to be.
It is an uncomfortable reminder of an attack on another off-duty serviceman 3 years ago. Then Fusilier Lee Rigby was run down and murdered in Woolwich by 2 British extremists.
We know ever since the brutal murder of Lee Rigby that terrorist groups like ISIS have become obsessed in targeting the police and the military, killing them, abducting them, using them for propaganda purposes.
Police investigators are now examining hours of CCTV footage and have set up a hotline for any witnesses to come forward. For the moment, this is a criminal investigation, but police say they cannot discount terrorism as a possible motive. Sophie Long, BBC News, RAF Marham.
Let's speak to our security correspondent, Frank Gardner, who's with me here. Frank, this has disturbing echoes of past attempts on UK servicemen and women, one, of course, successful. How seriously is this being taken?
Well, very seriously, whatever the motives of it are. And you heard there the police saying that they're keeping all options open, they're not ruling out terrorism, or they're not ruling it in for that matter. I have to say that that is probably the prime suspect motive, because if it was robbery, you wouldn't really go to a high security, military base and attack a jogger if you were looking to rob somebody. It wouldn't be the normal path. But I think the fact that we live in quite a sort of febrile atmosphere at the moment, it's only days since Nice, and in those the Nice attack, which killed 84 people, and in the intervening days, we've had the axe attack on a German train. There have already been calls by so-called Islamic State. So against that backdrop, people are expecting the worst, I think. And there is, of course, a pattern of attempted attacks and plots. There was one at Lakenheath only 2 months ago. Two people were convicted for their part in an attempt to kidnap US servicemen or kill them or attack them. Let's wait and see what happens if they can catch these 2 men that are on the run.
Frank Gardner, thank you. Jeremy Corbyn has said that Labour MPs could face reselection when new parliamentary boundaries for their constituencies come into force in the year after next. It raises the possibility that Labour MPs who don't support his leadership may be out of a job. Mr Corbyn was speaking at the launch of his campaign to hold on as leader of the party. Our political correspondent Vicky Young has more details.
He was elected as Labour leader less than a year ago.
Thank you. Good morning.
But today Jeremy Corbyn was back on the campaign trail. Most Labour MPs have deserted him, but he says his desire to fight inequality, neglect and discrimination is motivating him to win again.
Our Labour movement is about improving people's lives, about ending injustices, about giving power to the powerless and building a society in which opportunity and wealth is shared.
A raft of policy announcements are promised over the summer. Today he made this pledge.
The next Labour government will require all employers to publish equality pay audits, detailing pay, grade and hours of every job alongside data on recognised equality characteristics.
But what about the deep divisions between him and his team in Parliament?
The reason you're here is because most of your MPs have decided it's not that they don't like you, they don't think that you will ever be Prime Minister.
This party is going places. This party is strong. This party is capable of winning a general election. And if I'm leader of the party, I will be that Prime Minister.
Mr Corbyn said it was the duty of all Labour MPs to get behind the party and take on the Conservatives. He offered his colleagues the hand of friendship, but seemed to confirm that they could be ousted as Labour candidates at the next election if they don't back him.
There will be a full and open selection process for every every constituency Labour party throughout the whole of the UK.
Mr Corbyn's allies insist that's not a threat to replace MPs with Corbyn supporting candidates. But the man who's challenging him in this contest isn't so sure.
It doesn't seem very friendly or kind or gentle to me for Jeremy to threaten everybody who works for him with the sack. It's not much of an employer that says, you know, work for me and work harder or I'm going to sack you all.
Why do you think you should be the next Labour leader?
I'm a socialist, same as Jeremy. I'm someone who wants a radical Labour platform, but I want a radical Labour government, not just principles. I want to put those principles into practice.
More than 500,000 people will get a vote in this leadership contest, and more than 100,000 of them signed up just this week. Jeremy Corbyn's team is convinced that the majority of them are on his side. So while he's lost support here in Parliament, today he certainly looked and sounded confident of victory.
But Owen Smith's supporters say things are shifting their way.
I supported Jeremy last year to be leader because I believed in a lot of what he was saying. I thought he could be a fantastic leader, I thought that he could put his ideas into practice, but the bottom line is they've stayed on paper.
Jeremy Corbyn simply doesn't have the support among Labour MPs. He doesn't have a shadow cabinet that is able to form an effective opposition, let alone an effective government.
Do you think Jeremy Corbyn could ever be Prime Minister?
No.
Team Corbyn, though, is as passionate as ever.
He has a massive mandate amongst grassroots people, and the attacks on him is really painful.
He's been providing tremendous leadership up and down the country, beginning with bringing into the Labour Party many people like myself.
And the Labour leader hopes that enthusiasm will help him see off his critics. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
The ban on Russia's entire athletics team competing in the Rio Olympics has been upheld despite a legal challenge. The Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland has rejected attempts by a number of Russian athletes to get it overturned. Russia's sports minister insisted the ruling was political and has no legal basis. Steve Rosenberg has spent the day with some of the athletes who are now out of the Games.
Near Moscow today, they were battling for medals. It's the Russian Cup. This event was supposed to be final preparation for the Summer Olympics. But Russian track and field is banned from international competition because of doping allegations. Today, more than 60 athletes lost their appeal in sport's highest court in Switzerland. They won't be going to Rio.
It's like death for us.
Death?
Yes, because the great aim for all professional athletes is to be the part of Olympics Games and to get medals.
For Maria Kuchina, Rio would have been her first Olympic Games. It's not fair, Maria tells me. Clean sportsmen should be allowed into the Olympics. I should be there. Russian officials say today's court decision has robbed Russian track and field athletes of their Olympic dream. But the nightmare scenario for Moscow would be a ban on all Russian sportsmen in Rio, the entire team. And that will be for the International Olympic Committee to decide. That's because this week, the World Anti-Doping Agency presented evidence of cheating by Russia in 30 sports with the help of a secret doping program. When I spoke to the head of the Russian Athletics Federation, Dmitry Shlyakhin, he denied there was any state-sponsored doping, and he called today's court ruling a human rights violation. But here's one man who disagrees. Six-time Olympic champion Usain Bolt in London today.
If you have the proof and you catch somebody, I definitely feel that you should take action. And if you feel like banning the whole team is the right action, then I'm all for it, you know what I mean?
But if Rio does go ahead without Russia, it will be humiliating for Moscow. These Olympics could mark a new low in relations between Russia and the West. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, near Moscow.
The Prime Minister Theresa May has met the French President François Hollande for talks in Paris. Speaking at a news conference, Mr Hollande said Britain must accept the free movement of people if it wants to remain in the single market after leaving the EU. And the sooner the UK begins formal talks to leave the EU, the better. Mrs May said the talks had been open and constructive. Lucy Williamson reports from Paris.
Je suis ravie d'être à Paris ce soir.
If only speaking the same language on Brexit was as easy. But the simple act of standing here beside President Hollande was in itself a reminder of what Theresa May had come to say.
We are not walking away from our friendship with France or any of our other European partners. Britain and France are two allies that stand together, looking out to the world, fighting for the values we share. As I said in my first speech as Prime Minister in the British Parliament this week, we share a firm belief in the values of liberté, égalité and fraternité, and together we will always defend them.
But the cracks over Brexit were opened by the first question, whether they discussed a deadline for Britain to start the formal process of leaving the EU.
Speaks about deadline. Question for you.
Mr Hollande wants Britain to trigger the process as soon as possible, and France is also talking tough on the terms of any eventual deal.
The UK is facing a choice: to stay in the single market and accept the free movement of people that goes with that, or to opt for another kind of relationship.
There's reason enough for Mr Hollande to make an exit from the EU look as unappealing as possible. France's far-right leader, Marine Le Pen, has promised to hold a similar referendum if she wins elections next year. Polls suggest a third of the country would support her. And at a British pub here this afternoon, there was a sense that Paris stood to gain from tough terms if it meant companies relocating back inside the EU. But there was also acceptance that Mrs May has some leverage too.
The big question for us is, I think there are 300,000 French guys in London. I mean, that will be the key point. And if it's tough with her, she has other arguments to put on the table. So now that the decision has been made, they will find a win-win solution.
This was a brave attempt at unity, but these two leaders have different interests and different visions. Friends, allies and neighbours, with a lot of history behind them and a new chapter in store.
We can speak to Lucy in Paris now. Lucy, Theresa May paid tribute to those who died in the Nice attack a week ago today, and more details are emerging today about that attack. What more can you tell us?
That's right. The Paris prosecutor has been speaking about it, and it looks as if Mohamed Boulel, the man that carried out the Nice attack, may not have been acting alone. There are 5 people in custody here tonight, suspected of being his accomplices. 4 men, 1 woman, French, Tunisian and Albanian nationalities. Now, you might remember the Interior Minister here said he thought Mohamed Boulel had been very quickly radicalised quite recently, but investigators have been looking through the phones and computers of these people, and they say that Mohamed Boulel sent a text message to one of them after the Charlie Hebdo attacks here last January in 2015. That's 18 months ago.
Lucy Williamson in Paris, thank you. Police in Brazil have arrested 10 people who it's claimed pledged allegiance to so-called Islamic State on social media and discussed possible attacks during the Olympics in Rio. All the suspects are said to be Brazilian. They were detained after talking about using weapons and guerrilla tactics to launch a potential attack during the Games, which open 2 weeks tomorrow. The government's confirmed today that university tuition fees in England will rise to £9,250 per year from 2017 and increase each year in line with inflation. The government says it wants to link higher fees to better teaching. The Liberal Democrats say they will try to stop the increase by forcing a vote by MPs in the autumn. New figures have revealed you're more likely to be a victim of fraud than any other type of crime in England and Wales. There were 5.8 million reported frauds last year, according to the Office of National Statistics. Most involved people being defrauded online or by having money taken from their bank accounts. Turkey's parliament has endorsed a 3-month state of emergency declared by the government in response to last week's failed coup. Some of the country's commitments under the European Convention on Human Rights have also been suspended. Some 60,000 people have been arrested, fired or suspended in the crackdown. Our special correspondent Fergal Keane has more.
There's no doubting now who's in charge. With a state of emergency, thousands of arrests, the president's grip on power has tightened. Waiting near the courts, parents of boys at a military school. The people gathered behind me are the families of young soldiers who've been detained, some of them in their early teens, 15, 16 years of age, and they just want news of what's happened to their children. At this tense time, they don't want to speak with the international media. Tens of thousands of people across the country have now been detained or fired or asked to leave their jobs. More than 9,000 people have been detained. Out of those, 2,270 are judges and prosecutors, nearly 7,000 soldiers, and more than 58,000 civil service employees have been dismissed or suspended. This veteran human rights lawyer is advising families of the detained.
I haven't felt safe for many years. I've been assaulted twice. I've been in prison, but I've never felt as unsafe as I do these days. Today, neither I or other human rights defenders can feel safe.
The government alleges it's facing a vast conspiracy planned by this former ally of President Erdogan, Islamic cleric Fethullah Gulen, now exiled in America. Some political opponents of the president, like this former general, agree.
This is a fact. This happened. This has been happening for quite a long time. Taking over the Turkish state has always been their primary aim. They never concealed this. They even did not attempt to hide this.
Among the president's support base, like these rural market stall holders who've migrated to the city, the narrative of conspiracy is readily accepted.
I sent my kids to a Gülenist school because it was religious. We never thought he would be like this. Thank God, we have finally seen what he really is.
But among key minority groups, fears are deepening of a more general repression. This was the day after the failed coup. Pro-government loyalists trying to enter a stronghold of the Alevi and Kurdish minorities. Historically alienated, many here see the emergency as a threat. Everyone other than Erdogan supporters are seen as potential criminals, a potential danger, says İlhay Dordoğan. In that way, opposition, Alevis, Kurds, leftists are threatened by religious groups. Tonight, people were called onto the streets and bridges once more. The state is using not only the law, but the power of the masses to advance its emergency. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Istanbul.
In just a few hours' time, Donald Trump will formally accept the Republican nomination for president at the party's convention in Cleveland, Ohio. It's been a bumpy convention, with his wife Melania's scriptwriter plagiarising words from a speech by Mrs. Obama and strong criticism from the Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Our North America editor John Sopel is in Cleveland for us. And John, wasn't this supposed to be a week that united the party, but it hasn't quite worked out that way?
Hasn't gone terribly well, Fiona, has it? Yeah, Ted Cruz was given a prime-time slot last night in this convention centre and he was meant to endorse Donald Trump, except he didn't. And then when criticised about it this morning, he said, I'm not in the habit of backing someone who attacks my wife and attacks my father. A clear reference to Donald Trump's behaviour. And he said, I am not a servile puppy dog. Well, that has caused fury within the Republican Party over his comments. Mr. Cruz, not the most popular man. But tonight is all about Donald Trump and this extraordinary journey that has taken him to be the Republican candidate for president.
He's the billionaire businessman who wants to be a political leader without being a politician. He's also been the host of a reality TV show where his fame derives from saying, "You're fired," but who could soon be hired by the American people to be their 45th president.
I'm Donald Trump, and I'm always on the lookout for talented people.
And the fact that he's not a politician is what marks him out from Hillary Clinton, says Roger Stone, Trump's closest advisor for many years.
I think in her case they see someone who is mouthing words written by others that have been polled and focus grouped and roundtabled, and they're stale and they're phony. You can tell they're not coming from her. In Donald Trump, they see a guy who is unscripted, who is unprogrammed, who is working without a net, who is speaking from the heart. And it's interesting, it's authentic.
And who else but Donald Trump would go to Scotland, as he did last month, to promote his golfing business when he's meant to be running for president? For him, there's no distinction. It's all part of the Trump brand.
This isn't what you would call orthodox political campaigning. A whole bunch of journalists on the back of vehicles that are normally meant to carry sand and peat, going across a golf course in Aberdeen. But then there's nothing very predictable about Donald Trump.
And that applies to policy too. No thick research documents, but no one's in any doubt what he thinks. It's provocative, sometimes divisive, and invariably challenging the status quo.
I'm going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it, right? Right? It will be American workers who are hired to do the job. Nobody else.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
What's striking about Donald Trump's policies are that they are simple, catchy and memorable, and no one has the faintest idea how any of them are going to be implemented. But here's the thing, it doesn't seem to matter, because people trust him to make America great again.
And the moment of truth has arrived.
So where does this leave the race? One by one, Donald Trump has seen off all his rivals, and now only Hillary Clinton stands in his way. All of which begs a simple question, which I put to the country's leading Republican pollster. Can Donald Trump be the next president of the United States of America?
I have no doubt that Donald Trump could be the next president. No doubt at all. But it's as much to do with what he does over the next 110 days as it is what she does over that same period. If the election is about Donald Trump, he's going to lose. If the election is about Hillary Clinton and what they think of her, he wins.
Yeah, I think this looks good. Honey, try.
This afternoon, Donald Trump was rehearsing with daughter Ivanka ahead of tonight's big speech. This hasn't been the unifying convention he'd hoped for, but that will be forgotten if, as they say over here, he knocks the ball out of the park tonight. John Sopel, BBC News, Cleveland.
The chief executive and chairman of Fox News, Roger Ailes, has resigned. He stepped down tonight following allegations of sexual harassment. He'll be replaced by Rupert Murdoch, who will assume the role of chairman and acting chief executive. A black man has been shot by police in Miami, despite laying on his back with his hands in the air and telling them repeatedly he was unarmed. The police had responded to reports of a man with a gun, but instead found Charles Kinsey, a therapist, who told officers he was trying to reassure his autistic patient sitting next to him, who was playing with a toy truck. Tensions are high in the US after a number of black people have been shot by police and police officers killed in retaliation.
I still got my hands in the air. I say, no, I just got shot. And I'm saying to myself, like, sir, why did you shoot me? And his words to me, he said, I don't know.
Hospitals in England will no longer be fined for failing to meet their A&E performance targets. Until now, any trust that doesn't see 95% of patients within 4 hours has been penalised. But that will change as part of a wide-ranging attempt to tackle budget deficits. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, is outside University College Hospital in central London. And this is part of a wider bid, isn't it, Hugh, to bring NHS finances under control?
Yes, Fiona, there have been many warnings recently about the state of the finances of the NHS in England, and today some very significant developments. First of all, the spending watchdog, the National Audit Office, rapped the government over the knuckles by saying the Department of Health in the latest financial year had only just kept within its agreed budget, and only then because of a transfer from National Insurance, which it hadn't told the Treasury about, apparently owing to an administrative error. The watchdog goes on to say it can't see any evidence of a plan to put the finances on a sustainable footing. Now, the head of NHS England, Simon Stevens, today has announced plans to try to bring down hospital deficits with a financial special measures regime, for example, and also the idea of abolishing fines which hospitals have to pay if they miss certain key targets, for example, waiting times in A&E. Now, there have been warnings tonight that this will affect patient care. The Patients Association has said, for example, it'll be back to the bad old days of never-ending waiting lists. Now, while some might argue financial prudence in the health service is a good thing, others will say what the NHS really needs is yet more money.
Hugh Pym, thank you. Everyone should consider taking vitamin D supplements in autumn and winter to make up for a lack of sun. That's the message from health experts today. The recommended intake of the vitamin is 10 micrograms a day, but officials are concerned this may not be achievable through diet alone. The so-called sunshine vitamin is vital for the absorption of calcium, which keeps our bones strong. The parents of a Pakistani social media celebrity who was strangled in a so-called honour killing by her brother have told the BBC he was motivated by shame. 26-year-old Kandil Baloch caused controversy in conservative Pakistan for the photos and videos she posted online, many of which were overtly sexual. Her brother has said he has no regrets about the crime. Saber Etizaz reports from South Punjab.
A social media star in a religiously and culturally conservative society. Kandil Baloch bared her skin and braved controversy in a country where flamboyance by women is still unacceptable.
Whatever I do in my personal life or otherwise, I put it out there on social media.
For her brother, her public profile was too much. Police say he confessed to killing her for bringing the family's honor into disrepute with her Facebook postings.
I removed the shawl and her whole face was covered in bruises. Her tongue was black, her lips were black. I felt that I'm finished.
Did you think about the reasons why such a thing happened at this time?
There was such noise about her, rumors, the wrong pictures, the wrong words were spread. That's why it happened. Her brother lost his mind. All his friends would taunt him. This is your sister. This is your sister.
In many cases of so-called honor killings, the murderer is forgiven by the family and walks free. Kandil's father says not this time. His son should be shot, he tells me. He suffocated my little one while we were asleep upstairs. Kandil's murder has divided the country, provoking large-scale protests. According to the Law Ministry, more than 1,000 women are murdered in Pakistan each year for breaking the conventional norms on love, marriage and public behavior. these are just the recorded cases. In an interview with the BBC before she died, Kandil said she wanted to challenge the ancient tribal customs.
I'm changing the image of the Baloch tribe. That's a good thing. The Baloch are famous for killing their girls for honor and for forbidding women from leaving the house. And that's how it is in our families.
In Pakistani society, where many remain chained to a certain social class or cultural narrative, Kandil was dreaming of freedom and escape. This music video was her last song of defiance. The lyrics say, "You're so sexy, I'm going to ban you." Sabah Itazaz, BBC News, South Punjab.
Now, it was a hit in Lagos, and now it's coming to London. Waka, the musical, follows the fate of a group of young graduates as they begin to find their way in the world. The show aims to give audiences a taste of modern-day Nigeria. It opened tonight, and it's the first Nigerian-produced musical to be performed at a London theatre. Our arts editor, Will Gompertz, went to see it.
Musical theatre, Nigerian style. Soulful, colourful and dynamic. It's not as slick as a West End blockbuster or as expensive, but it has a spirit and a sensibility that feels fresh and true. The show tells the story of a group of young Nigerian graduates with different hopes, dreams and aspirations.
What were the themes that you wanted to explore and present?
There's a tendency for us to feel that everybody is corrupt in Nigeria, but we are not. So what I was trying to do was to juxtapose what people perceive to be the case and what the majority of us want. And that's why you have the character Tosin.
I have great ideas. I'm talking about ideas that will help, put to an end the theming level of unemployment that we have in this state.
The average Nigerian works hard, wants to do good, wants to change his country.
Tosin. Try and catch your breath first.
Also, I was addressing the issue of migration. A lot of people live in Nigeria and brain drain, and also always thinking that the grass is greener on the other side. It's not always the case, as in the case of Rex.
Superstar, dancer, London's West there, yeah. Because when
That was the plan. And then he arrived in London.
You look different in your pictures. You're not white.
Oh, that's just some model I use as my profile picture.
Forget what they gotta say.
Life then gets complicated, but not for the cast, whose motivation is clear.
You know, all the stories from Nigeria are horrible.
Yeah.
You don't hear any good stories. Either you are fantastically corrupt, Boko Haram is bombing someone somewhere. But we're bringing a story of hope. And I believe we are the future. We, the youth, are the future. And we want to change the way Nigeria is portrayed in the media. And that is really why we're here.
This show is a little bit different, and so was tonight's audience. The big subsidised theatres here in the UK say they want to attract a more diverse crowd, but struggle to do so. Perhaps they should go along and see how it's done. Will Gompertz, BBC News.
Newsnight is coming up on BBC Two. Here's James O'Brien.
Tonight, not a year in the job, and Jeremy Corbyn's facing his first leadership challenge. Was today's campaign launch a brave new dawn or business as usual? The Labour leader tells us why he's the man to lead not just the party, but the country. Join me now on BBC Two.
And here on BBC One, it's time for news where you are. Bye-bye.